Hidden beneath the polished marble floors of Vatican City lies a world few will ever see. Sealed behind thick metal doors, guarded by time, secrecy, and authority, is a vault said to contain the most restricted knowledge ever collected by humankind. Not myths, not metaphors, but actual documented records, tucked away in shelves that stretch for over 50 miles beneath the surface of the most powerful religious institution on Earth. Why? Why would the Church, built on a foundation of truth and light, lock away its own history under shadow? What could be so volatile, so terrifying that it must be protected not from destruction but from discovery? We're told the Vatican archives are simply a repository of old correspondence, forgotten letters, and papal memos. But what happens when whispers begin to surface about forbidden gospels, ancient bloodlines, prophetic devices, and creatures that defy classification? This is no ordinary library. This is a sanctum sealed not with chains, but with centuries of silence. Access is restricted to an elite few, carefully vetted scholars granted permission to study only the documents they are told exist. No wandering, no photography, no digital catalog available to the public. In an age where knowledge flows freely, why does the Church still maintain such a fortress of secrets? Some believe it's to protect faith. Others believe it's to protect power. Stories emerge from those who've brushed the edges of its mystery. Accounts of ancient texts that contradict the Bible. Letters from exorcists documenting encounters too disturbing for daylight. Maps that show continents that don't exist or perhaps used to. But still the doors remain shut. And as each decade passes, the question grows louder. Is this archive a shelter for sacred truth or a prison for forbidden revelations? Whatever the answer, one thing is certain. Beyond those holy doors, something is being hidden. And someone, somewhere, decided that the world simply isn't ready to see it. Above ground, St. Peter's Basilica rises like a monument to divine glory. Its soaring dome, golden altars, and sunlight streaming through stained glass evoke awe, reverence, and peace. Pilgrims gather in hushed wonder, their footsteps echoing beneath Renaissance ceilings that seem to touch heaven itself. But beneath this grandeur, the atmosphere shifts. Down in the archives, the air is thick, not with incense, but with secrets. There are no choirs here, no prayers. Only a silence so absolute it feels deliberate, almost watchful. It's a silence that doesn't comfort, it unsettles. The kind of silence that suggests something is being buried, not just preserved. Insiders speak in vague tones if they speak at all. Some left the Church entirely after what they read. Others refused to comment, eyes clouded by fear, or perhaps shame. A few even vanished from public life altogether. This silence doesn't beg to be broken, it demands to be obeyed. And in that obedience lies the most terrifying question of all. What truth lies so deep, so disruptive, that even the most faithful are warned to look away? In 1559, under the command of Pope Paul IV, the Vatican published a list so controversial it would shape the future of knowledge itself. It was called the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the Index of Forbidden Books. Its purpose, to root out heresy, silence dissent, and guard the faithful from what the Church deemed dangerous ideas. But these weren't merely books about witchcraft or devil worship. They were works of science, philosophy, history, many written by brilliant thinkers whose only crime was asking the wrong questions. Galileo, Copernicus, Descartes. Even the Bible itself, when translated without permission, found its way onto the index. The message was clear. Truth was not to be discovered, but delivered. And the gatekeepers of that truth were dressed not in lab coats or robes of reason, but in vestments stitched by divine authority. What exactly were they trying to protect us from? Dangerous theology or liberating knowledge? Some texts allegedly hinted at alternate origins of mankind. Others reinterpreted the story of the fall, suggesting Eve's choice was not sin but awakening. A few contained prophecies that contradicted church doctrine entirely. The index remained active for over 400 years. Generation after generation, minds were molded while alternative narratives were methodically erased. Even after its formal abolishment in 1966, the spirit of suppression lingers. Because some of those forbidden works didn't disappear. They were locked away. Not destroyed, but hidden. Waiting. Occasionally a whisper escapes the walls. A scholar, years after their brief access to the archives, speaks in riddles during interviews, never fully revealing but never denying what they saw. One former Jesuit priest, speaking under anonymity, described the feeling not of discovery but of dread. "There are texts," he said, "that unravel more than belief. They unravel identity, who we are, why we're here." Another defector claimed to have read a manuscript older than any canonized gospel, one that described a divine being split into male and female forms, suggesting a suppressed theology where creation began with unity, not hierarchy. He never published his findings. Within months, he left the public eye altogether. A young linguistic researcher once confessed to a friend with tears in his eyes that he'd read a letter detailing a miracle performed by a figure not recognized by any major religion. "It wasn't the content," he said. "It was the implication, that we've never really been told the whole story." These testimonies often fade into conspiracy. No names, no proof. But the consistency of their tone, shaken, haunted, reverent, suggests something more than invention. These aren't the words of charlatans chasing fame. They're the quiet echoes of minds cracked open by truths they were never meant to hold. Buried deeper than most are the whispers of a text so blasphemous, so paradigm-shattering that even many within the church deny its existence. It's been called the Gospel of the Serpent, a name passed between scholars like a curse. Supposedly translated from fragments discovered in the early 3rd century, this gospel never saw the light of doctrinal debate. It was sealed immediately, hidden, smothered beneath centuries of theological ash. What makes it so dangerous? According to those who claim to have seen excerpts, it paints a radically different portrait of Lucifer, not as the great deceiver, but as a bearer of forbidden knowledge, not the enemy of humanity, but its awakener. In this version of Genesis, the serpent does not tempt Eve into sin, but invites her into consciousness, awareness, freedom from blind obedience. And God, as portrayed in this account, is not entirely benevolent, but jealous, guarding divine knowledge from his own creation. The implications are staggering. It suggests that the original fall of mankind was not a fall at all, but a step toward enlightenment. That the serpent was not the villain, but the catalyst for evolution. Such ideas are not just controversial, they're destabilizing. They invert the moral architecture of Western religion. If Lucifer is reinterpreted as misunderstood, what happens to the entire system of sin, redemption, and salvation? What becomes of heaven and hell? Some argue this gospel aligns with suppressed Gnostic traditions, in which divine truth is hidden from the masses and accessible only to those who seek beyond the veil. Others believe the text was forged as a deliberate test, designed to fracture faith and feed rebellion. But whether real or apocryphal, the idea itself is enough to disturb, because even the possibility that such a document exists raises the most terrifying question of all. What if the story we've been told, of light versus darkness, was reversed from the very beginning? Modern Catholic doctrine rests on absolutes: good and evil, God and Satan, heaven and hell. The lines are clear, the narrative firm. But what happens if those lines were drawn over something far more complex? If the gospel of the serpent holds even a fragment of truth, then the foundational story of Eden isn't about rebellion, it's about awakening. The serpent becomes not a corrupter but a liberator, and God, rather than an infallible creator, is recast as a gatekeeper of hidden knowledge. This flips the entire moral cosmos on its head. Suddenly, salvation isn't obedience, it's questioning. Faith isn't surrender, it's awareness. And evil? It becomes a matter of perspective. In such a world, doctrine begins to fracture. Certainty erodes. The binary collapses into ambiguity, forcing a deeper reckoning. Are we worshiping a being of light, or simply the one who wrote the winning version of the story? To question this isn't just heresy, it's existential. And yet the very existence of these questions suggests they've been asked, quietly, fearfully, for centuries. Within the dense corridors of the Vatican archives are said to exist a series of documents so heavily redacted they resemble crime scene reports more than historical texts. They're known informally among archivists as the body files, and their contents, though shrouded in secrecy, point to something profoundly unsettling. According to rare leaks and second-hand testimonies, these files reference the examination of remains uncovered in early church excavations, bones and tissues that didn't align with known human anatomy. Unusual cranial formations, elongated limbs, doubled rib structures, even inscriptions found etched into bone. One document, allegedly translated from an early Aramaic scroll, describes a giant of the old world whose skeleton was unearthed beneath a collapsed temple in northern Syria. The church's response? Immediate quarantine, private transport to Rome, and total suppression of any further study. Another report, said to be from a 17th century Jesuit mission in South America, speaks of a mummified entity with both mammalian and reptilian features. The missionaries, unsure whether they had encountered a demon, a god, or something older, recorded their findings, sealed the remains, and were never heard from again. Skeptics call these stories exaggerations, misinterpretations of natural deformities or ritualistic burial practices. But if that were the case, why redact the records? Why lock them away beneath layers of ecclesiastical privilege? The very act of censorship suggests fear, not of hoax, but of revelation. These aren't just anatomical curiosities. They challenge the idea that humanity is alone or even primary in the ancient record. If these beings walked the earth, the timeline of creation is wrong. If they were worshipped, the structure of religion itself is shaken. What then are these bodies? Angelic? Demonic? Extraterrestrial? Or something else altogether? Something we've forgotten but the Church never has? Among the most whispered rumors about the Vatican's sealed vaults are not about words, but images. Faded sketches, grainy photographs, charcoal renderings, each depicting entities that defy classification. Some appear humanoid, but with elongated skulls and hollow eyes. Others resemble classical depictions of angels, wings folded with anatomical precision, but with expressions that evoke anything but comfort. One account describes a series of hand-drawn studies made by a Vatican-appointed anatomist in the early 1800s. The subject? A figure recovered from beneath a collapsed cathedral in Turkey. Wings, yes, but not feathers. Thin membranes like a bat and joints that bent the wrong way. A being described as beautiful and horrifying. Another sketch, dated 1944, allegedly shows what Vatican officials referred to as the quiet guest, a preserved body recovered by Allied forces and quietly transferred to Rome. Its eyes are oversized, its limbs are delicate, its mouth is entirely absent. Whether it was ever alive is unclear. What it was remains unanswered. Are these the angels of ancient texts? Are they demons? Or are they something far older, beings once mistaken for gods or monsters by early civilizations? The line between divine, damned, and extraterrestrial begins to blur, and with it our understanding of spiritual history unravels. Are we the children of creation, or the witnesses of something we were never meant to see? In hushed corners of prophetic lore lies a figure both revered and feared, the Black Pope. Not a literal title, but a symbolic one, representing the rise of a shadow pontiff, a final authority whose reign will coincide with the unraveling of the world as we know it. Officially, the Vatican dismisses the prophecy. Unofficially, some within its walls have dedicated entire lifetimes to studying its accuracy and its timing. The roots of this prophecy trace back to the prophecy of the popes, a 12th century manuscript attributed to Saint Malachi. It lists 112 pontiffs, each described cryptically. The final entry reads, "In the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church there will sit Peter the Roman, who will feed his flock amid many tribulations, after which the city of 7 hills shall be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge the people." Some interpret this as signaling the last pope. Others see it as a warning encoded in divine language. Yet hidden beyond Malachi's list, according to leaks from inside the archives, are even darker revelations. Suppressed scrolls dated centuries earlier describe the arrival of a false light, a spiritual figure cloaked in peace who ushers in control, surveillance, and the erasure of ancient truths. This figure, the Black Pope, is not necessarily a villain but a symbol of corrupted divinity, one who carries the appearance of salvation while guiding humanity into spiritual bondage. One chilling passage, allegedly translated from an early Latin codex, warns, "When the shepherd wears no shadow and speaks only what is heard, the gates of the abyss shall open in silence." Scholars who reviewed it claimed it aligns eerily with modern religious media, where popes speak through tightly controlled channels and personal presence gives way to global broadcasting. Some believe the prophecy connects to geopolitical movements, the merging of global power structures, economic centralization, and the blurring of religious boundaries. Others interpret it as psychological, the final war not fought with weapons but with ideas, symbols, and spiritual manipulation. If these chronicles are accurate, they paint a picture of a world unknowingly marching toward its own reprogramming. Not an end through fire or flood, but through quiet, calculated transformation, so gradual that we thank the architects of our own forgetting. The Church, it seems, may not be hiding the end of the world, but the fact that it has already begun. Whispers persist that the Vatican archives hold not only secrets of prophecy but manipulations of the past itself. Among the more disturbing claims is the quiet removal or rewriting of key historical dates, events that once existed in records but now appear missing. Battles that vanished. Monarchs with reigns no longer documented, even entire decades whose timelines no longer align. One theory suggests a recalibration of history was orchestrated to conceal contact, moments where humanity brushed against truths too vast to control. Another links it to prophetic sequences where altering the past subtly redirects the path of the future. But why would the Church interfere with time? To protect faith, or to maintain a carefully crafted illusion? Some suspect the missing years were part of a theological recalibration, aligning Christ's life with celestial events or distancing the Church's rise from older pagan truths. Others believe it's about power. Whoever controls time controls perception, and ultimately belief. If these dates were removed, the real question isn't how, but what was taken from us, and why we were never supposed to remember it existed at all. Beneath the oldest wing of the Vatican archives, behind a door with no official designation, lies a vault spoken of only in murmurs, B13. It does not appear on any map. No records confirm its contents. And yet, for those who have worked in the archives long enough, the stories become impossible to ignore. According to whispered legend, B13 contains not just information, but a presence. Some say it's a book bound in a material that doesn't age, written in a language that seems to rewrite itself as you read. Others claim it holds a sealed reliquary, an artifact so charged with spiritual energy that even brief exposure has driven men to madness. One tale comes from a mid-20th century cardinal assigned to catalog restricted holdings. He spoke of a room kept at unnatural temperatures, guarded not by men but by automated systems that activated only when a human came too close. He never entered, he said. He simply stood outside the door and wept. He left the Vatican 6 months later. No explanation. Never returned. Another chilling account tells of a Jesuit scholar granted limited access to a document retrieved from B13. He read only 2 pages before suffering what doctors described as a complete psychological collapse. In his final coherent moment, he reportedly whispered, "It knows I saw it." What could possibly require this level of protection? Not secrecy, but containment. Some believe B13 houses a fragment of an ancient manuscript said to predate all known civilizations. Others suspect it's not an object at all, but a recording, audio or visual, of something witnessed long ago and never understood. A ritual, a presence, a voice. Whatever it is, it's not locked away for safekeeping. It's quarantined, not hidden to protect the church, but to protect the world. And the implication is clear. There are things buried so deep in human memory, so dark in spiritual resonance, that to know them is to invite ruin. Vault B13 isn't about silence. It's about survival. Buried beneath the official history of World War II is a network of quiet collaborations, alliances formed not for territory but for knowledge. Among the most disturbing of these is a shadow operation known only to a handful of researchers as Operation Vaticanum. According to declassified whispers and testimonies buried in obscure footnotes, this covert program involved an unholy alliance between Vatican officials and elements of the Axis powers. But it wasn't weapons they were after. It was ancient technology, manuscripts, artifacts recovered from secret excavation sites across Europe and North Africa. Some believed to be relics of a lost civilization, others inscribed with symbols older than any known written language. One document from a U.S. intelligence archive references a shipment of non-conventional material transferred to Vatican custody in March 1944 under armed escort. The cargo included magnetic tablets, lightless optics, and an unidentified orb emitting rhythmic pulses. The report ends abruptly with half the text redacted. Why would the Church, the moral guardian of the West, participate in such a transaction? Some theorists argue the Vatican saw these materials not as science but as sacred. Others believe it was an act of containment, to keep certain technologies out of public hands. After all, a device capable of revealing the future or accessing lost memories would challenge not just governments but God. And if that challenge came from relics tied to civilizations before the flood, or not of this earth at all, the theological implications would be devastating. Operation Vaticanum remains officially unacknowledged, but its fingerprints are found in too many places, too many fragments of evidence hidden in too many unrelated archives. Together, they paint a chilling possibility that in the smoke of global war, a far older war was reignited, the war over who controls truth and who gets to bury it. Among the strangest legends tied to the Vatican's modern history is the tale of the Chronovisor, a machine said to allow its user not to travel through time, but to witness it. Past events, future possibilities, echoes etched into the fabric of reality made visible through forbidden science. The story surfaced in the 1960s when Father Pellegrino Ernetti, a Benedictine monk and respected exorcist, claimed to have worked on the device with a team of scientists, including Nobel laureate Enrico Fermi. Ernetti insisted the Chronovisor could tune into historical events like frequencies, projecting them onto a screen. The crucifixion of Christ, lost plays of antiquity, even the destruction of future cities. Of course, the Vatican denied everything, but Ernetti's claims were unsettlingly detailed. He described the device's structure: cathode rays, curved antennas, exotic alloys, as if reciting classified schematics. Shortly before his death, he allegedly retracted his story, but many believe he was coerced. Why would the Church invest in such a machine? And more importantly, what did they see? Some suggest the Chronovisor didn't just reveal history, it confirmed inconvenient truths. Others believe it glimpsed timelines never meant to be known, futures too grim, revelations too destabilizing. If such a device ever existed, it was likely dismantled or buried, but perhaps still watching. Tucked deep within the Vatican's non-circulating archive, rumored not proven, are maps unlike any known to cartographic history. These are not medieval depictions of symbolic heavens or religious territories. They are precise, technical, almost surgical in detail, and they do not align with any version of our current globe. Whispers speak of one such artifact, a map etched into thin copper plates believed to have been recovered during a 15th century excavation in Anatolia. It outlines a vast continent in the middle of the Atlantic, complete with marked cities, mountain ranges, and symbols that resemble no known language. According to some accounts, the markings were later matched, uncannily, to descriptions from Plato's dialogues on Atlantis. Another map, allegedly acquired through a Jesuit contact in Tibet, depicts the poles without ice. It shows river systems winding through what we now call Antarctica, flanked by ruins marked with symbols that resemble early Sumerian script. The implications are staggering. Not just that civilization predates what we're taught, but that entire ages have been systematically removed from history. Then there are the so-called hollow earth diagrams. Dismissed by mainstream historians as the stuff of fantasy, these illustrations portray massive subterranean structures beneath the Earth's crust, networks, even cities, accessed through polar entry points. Some versions include annotations in Latin and Greek, suggesting these weren't imagined but recorded from earlier sources, long lost or long hidden. Why would such documents be held in the Vatican? Why would a religious institution hoard geographical artifacts that contradict not only science but scripture? Some believe they are relics of the pre-flood world, the remnants of a forgotten epoch erased by time and theology alike. Others suggest the Church feared the destabilizing effect of such knowledge, that humanity's origins aren't divine but cyclical, that we rise, fall, and forget again and again. These maps have no coordinates, no references in modern atlases. They are said to exist under one classification only: Terra Prohibita, the Forbidden Lands. Not because they are unreachable, but because they were never meant to be remembered. For every forbidden map rumored to exist, there are stories of those sent to verify them: explorers, scholars, even clergy, men chosen not by accident but by trust. Some were dispatched quietly, under religious cover. Others traveled as part of military expeditions masked as cartographic surveys. But what links them is not what they found. It's that they never came back the same, if they came back at all. One tale speaks of a Jesuit priest sent to Greenland in 1938 to investigate anomalous terrain markings that matched those on a suppressed Vatican chart. His final telegram read simply, "It's real." He was never heard from again. A small unit of soldiers, according to an unconfirmed intelligence memo, vanished during a post-war operation near the South Pole, an area tied to inner Earth legends. Their mission was unlisted, Their bodies were never recovered. Others returned but never spoke. Silent, distant, broken in ways no briefing could explain. Were they protecting secrets, or silenced by the weight of what they had seen? Whatever they found, it was never published, never acknowledged. Only erased, like the maps that led them there. At the heart of Christian history lies a profound irony. The story of divine truth was not simply received, it was edited. Councils convened by emperors and theologians decided what books would define salvation and which would be cast into silence. Among them, none looms larger than the First Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, a meeting that would forever shape the boundaries of belief. We are taught that this was a moment of unity, that the council clarified doctrine, defined Jesus' divinity, and silenced heresies. But what we're rarely told is what was removed. Entire Gospels, written by apostles and early followers, were excluded. Texts like the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, and others, which offered mystical, non-hierarchical paths to the divine. They spoke of inner revelation, divine equality, and a kingdom not of structure but of consciousness. Why were these voices silenced? Because they threatened the emerging power structure. A decentralized personal connection to the divine leaves little room for intermediaries. No church, no priest, no control. Over the centuries, more councils followed: Ephesus, Chalcedon, Constantinople. With each one, the narrative narrowed. God became more distant, sin more defined, the church more necessary. Truth was no longer something you could find. It had to be given, authorized, pre-approved. What if the Bible we hold today is not the complete story, but the selected one? What if the divine message wasn't lost, but censored? This isn't about theology. It's about control. About how history was sculpted not by revelation, but by committee. About how sacred truth was filtered through politics, fear, and empire. For many believers, this realization cuts deeper than any heresy. It's betrayal wrapped in liturgy. Not that God is false, but that his words were trimmed to fit a throne. What else was left on the cutting room floor of heaven? And who decided we were never meant to see it? Among the most closely guarded rumors whispered through the halls of the Vatican is one that strikes at the very core of Christian tradition: the existence of a bloodline. A human lineage said to descend directly from Jesus of Nazareth. Officially, it's blasphemy. The Church maintains Christ was divine, celibate, and ascended without legacy. But scattered references in suppressed texts, Gnostic Gospels, and oral traditions suggest otherwise. Some speak of a sacred union between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, not as metaphor but as historical fact. Genealogical scrolls allegedly discovered in a sealed chamber beneath a French monastery and quietly transferred to the Vatican in the 1800s reportedly trace a line through southern Europe. The names have been redacted. The scrolls were never seen again. Why suppress such a revelation? Because it collapses the myth of separation. If the divine once bore children, then heaven touched earth in blood and flesh. The sacred becomes human. The church becomes unnecessary. And yet the whispers remain. In stone carvings, secret societies, and ancient families sworn to silence. A lineage not lost, but hidden. Not extinct, but watching. Because some truths aren't denied. They're simply too dangerous to say aloud. Across centuries, civilizations have risen and fallen under one shared force: our thirst for truth. Not comfort, not convenience, but truth, raw and unfiltered. It's what drove ancient explorers across oceans, mystics into caves, and scholars into exile. But what happens when the truth we seek is darker than we imagined? What happens when knowledge itself becomes a form of peril? The Vatican's vaults, if the whispers are to be believed, are not just hiding history. They are safeguarding thresholds. thresholds of belief, of identity, of reality. And behind those doors lie truths not only about God, but about us. Who we are, where we came from, what we might become if we dared to remember. The irony is sharp. Institutions built to preserve faith may have done so by burying the very evidence of its origin. Not out of malice, but fear. Fear that humanity isn't ready. That knowledge without wisdom leads to ruin. That some fires once lit cannot be extinguished. And yet, perhaps it is this very act of suppression that defines us, not as sheep, but as seekers. The archives may be sealed, but questions slip through the cracks. A bloodline obscured, a map erased, a prophecy interrupted. These fragments speak not just of cover-ups, but of potential. Because maybe, just maybe, the secrets kept from us aren't meant to destroy faith, but to forge it anew. Not in temples or cathedrals, but in the deep stillness of the mind willing to ask, what else have I not been told? To know the forbidden is to stand at the edge of a cliff and look down, knowing you can never unsee it. But it's also to rise, to reclaim what was stolen, a stolen history, a silenced divinity, a forgotten self. Are some secrets too dangerous to know? Or are they the very keys to our liberation? Keys they'll never give us because they were meant for us to find. If you've made it this far, something inside you has already shifted. You've crossed a threshold, not of belief, but of perception. You feel it, don't you? The hum beneath the silence, the crack in the stained glass, the knowing that refuses to go back to sleep. You were never meant to read this, never meant to wonder if the serpent was right, if time can be watched, if blood remembers. But you are here, and that means the truth is no longer theirs to keep. It's yours now.